No one important ever sits at the wrong table by accident. The words would echo in Daniel Hayes's mind later. But at that moment he was just a tired mechanic with oil under his fingernails and a service badge that barely got him through the palace gates. Plasma rain shimmered against the energy dome above the Imperial Hall, casting blue light across marble floors polished so smooth they reflected the chandeliers like a second sky. Daniel had been on his feet for 14 hours straight, repairing a destabilized fusion relay that powered half the eastern wing. His coveralls were clean enough to pass inspection, but the faint scent of metal and ozone clung to him like a second skin. He didn't belong among crystal glasses and tailored suits. He knew that. He just needed a chair. So he took one. The hall quieted a fraction too late. The chair he'd chosen wasn't near the outer service tables. It stood beneath the central crest of the empire, golden sigil of a 1,000-year dynasty. Across from him sat a young woman with deep blue skin that caught the light like ocean water at dusk. Her silver hair was woven into an intricate crown braid, precise and ceremonial. She did not rise when the nobles did. She did not move at all. The floating platform beneath her chair hummed softly, stabilizers glowing a steady white. Princess Aracel Kaler, heir to the emperor, regarded him without alarm. Her eyes were not cold. They were curious. Daniel felt every guard in the room recalculating his life expectancy in inches. He started to stand. "You're in my seat," he muttered, voice low, already bracing for escort removal. "No," she said gently. "You're in mine." The air tightened. Somewhere high above, plasma struck the dome again, a ripple of electric light washing over them both. Daniel finally noticed the insignia etched into the table's surface, royal lineage markers, inlaid in gold. Wrong table didn't begin to cover it. He expected outrage. He expected an order. Instead, the princess tilted her head slightly. "You look exhausted," she said. No one had said that to him in years. Not since the shipyard accident that ended his engineering career and reduced him to emergency maintenance contracts paid by the hour. He shrugged. Long shift. Her gaze dropped to his hands. Not with disgust. With attention. "You repaired the east relay," she said. The fluctuation dropped by 0.03%. He blinked. "You monitor the grid?" "I designed part of it." A faint hum shifted beneath her chair. He noticed then what the others pretended not to see. The absence of movement below her waist. The way the stabilizers compensated subtly to keep her upright. She watched him process it. Not with shame. With defiance. "Do I look broken to you, mechanic?" she asked softly. The question landed heavier than any command. Daniel met her eyes fully now. "No," he said. "You look like someone no one let stand on her own terms." Silence rippled outward. Not offended silence. Surprised silence. And for the first time that night, the princess smiled. Not as royalty, not as heir, but as a person who had just been seen. The smile did not last long. Around them, silk sleeves shifted and crystal glasses stilled midair as nobles recalculated what they had just witnessed. Daniel felt it like static across his skin. He should stand. He should apologize properly. Instead, he found himself leaning back slightly in the gilded chair, aware that the fusion relay he had repaired less than an hour ago pulsed somewhere beneath the marble floors, carrying enough current to power a small city. Princess Arazel's hover platform emitted a soft, controlled hum at about 40 decibels, steady and precise. "You are not afraid," she observed. It was not a question. Daniel let out a slow breath. "I am very aware of where I am," he said. "That is different." A flicker of approval passed through her eyes. Above them, another wave of plasma rain rippled against the dome. The energy shield responded with a faint tremor, a fluctuation so subtle most would never notice. Daniel did. His gaze shifted upward automatically. "The dome is compensating too slowly," he murmured, half to himself. Aracel followed his line of sight. "By how much?" "Half a second lag on redistribution. It is small, but it will compound if the storm intensifies." She studied him carefully now, as though recalibrating her assessment. "You can see that?" "I can hear it," he replied. "The pitch changes when the capacitors strain." She did not doubt him. That was what unsettled him most. Servants moved like shadows along the perimeter. No one approached the central table without instruction. The princess rested her hands lightly on the armrests of her chair, fingers long and steady. "Most people hear music in this hall," she said. "You hear systems." Systems are honest, Daniel answered. They fail for reasons. People fail for excuses. A faint silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was measured. She tilted her head slightly. You speak as if you have experience with both. He almost smiled. I used to design propulsion arrays for interplanetary freighters. 1,200 megawatts per cycle. Then one oversight, one supervisor who wanted numbers to look better on paper, and suddenly I was the liability. He shrugged. Now I fix what other people break. The hover platform adjusted 2 inches higher, aligning her eye level with his. And if no one allows you to fix it? She asked. He met her gaze evenly. Then I sit at the wrong table and point out the flaw anyway. For a brief moment, the princess laughed. It was soft, controlled, but real. Several heads turned sharply at the sound, as though laughter from the heir to the empire was an unscheduled event. She leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice. You realize my father is watching. Daniel did not turn, but he felt the weight of observation from the elevated balcony above the hall. I assumed as much, he said. He lets the storm test the dome, she continued quietly. He lets the court test me. It is his way of measuring strength. Daniel considered that. Strength is not measured by pressure, he said. It is measured by what you protect when pressure comes. Her expression changed at that. Not softer, sharper, as though a new variable had entered her calculations. Above them, the dome flickered again, brighter this time. The hum shifted half a tone higher. Daniel's jaw tightened. There, he whispered. That is not just weather. Arizel's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. He did not hesitate. Someone adjusted the load balancing. Intentionally. And for the first time that evening, the princess did not look at him as a curiosity. She looked at him as an ally. The word intentionally did not echo loudly, but it carried weight. Arizel did not look toward the balcony this time. She kept her eyes on Daniel, measuring the steadiness in his voice. Around them, the orchestra resumed a cautious melody, strings gliding over tension as if music could smooth the edges of a rising storm. The nobles returned to quiet conversations, unaware that the hum beneath their feet had shifted from harmony to strain. Daniel tilted his head slightly, listening past the music, past the chatter, down into the bones of the palace. The load balancers are redirecting power away from the western grid, he said softly. That section supports the dome reinforcement and your platform stabilizers. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the armrest. The storm alone would not cause that, she asked. No, he replied. Storms are chaotic, but consistent. This is precise. Someone reduced your redundancy by exactly 12%. A calculated number. Not an accident. The hover platform flickered once, so faint only someone watching closely would notice. Daniel noticed. He stood without thinking, stepping closer to the edge of her table. Several guards shifted, hands hovering near ceremonial sidearms. But Arizel lifted one hand slightly, and they froze. You believe this is a test, she said quietly. Or a message? Both, Daniel answered. If the system falters publicly, it makes you look fragile. If it holds, whoever adjusted it learns how much strain you can survive. He did not say the rest. That the margin was narrowing. Another ripple of plasma struck the dome. The light overhead flared white for half a second. Gasps fluttered through the hall like startled birds. The hover platform dipped nearly an inch before correcting. Daniel felt his pulse climb, but kept his movements controlled. Where is the primary override? He asked. Arizel studied him carefully. Only the Emperor and the High Engineer possess direct access. And you? I designed portions of the architecture, she said. But after my injury, my clearance was adjusted. The pause between words held more history than accusation. Daniel nodded once. He understood that tone. He had heard it in shipyards when management reassigned responsibility under the language of safety. Then the manual interface will still exist, he said. Somewhere close to the core. 3 floors below this hall. She replied without hesitation. Behind a biometric gate. He gave a short breath of a laugh. Biometrics can be persuaded. Her eyes sharpened again. You are suggesting we leave the hall. It was not outrage. It was calculation. I am suggesting, he said evenly, that if someone is reducing your support systems during a public event, standing still is the only losing option. For a moment, she said nothing. The music swelled artificially, too loud now, as if someone had ordered the volume raised to drown out unease. The dome shimmered again, brighter, longer. Daniel could feel the energy variance in his chest, a low vibration like distant thunder measured in kilowatts instead of clouds. Aracel looked toward the balcony at last. High above, the Emperor remained seated, face unreadable in shadow. Watching. Always watching. She turned back to Daniel. "If you are wrong," she said softly, "you will not be invited back." He met her gaze without flinching. "I was not invited in the first place." A breath passed between them, steady and shared. Then she issued a quiet command to her platform. The stabilizers shifted, angling toward the grand staircase that descended beneath the hall. And without announcing it to the court, the heir to the empire began to move. The staircase spiraled downward beneath the grand hall like the inside of a polished shell, white stone reflecting pulses of blue light from the storm above. Arazel's hover platform descended smoothly, guided by silent thrusters that adjusted every few inches to maintain balance. Daniel walked beside her, boots striking marble with steady rhythm, the sound swallowed by the low hum of the palace power grid running beneath them. He could feel the imbalance growing stronger the deeper they went, a vibration traveling through the structure like a warning heartbeat. "The biometric gate is at the base," Aracel said quietly. "It reads genetic markers and neural patterns." Daniel nodded once. "Then it also logs every access attempt." "Yes." "Good," he replied. "If someone altered the load balancing, they had to mask their trail. That leaves fingerprints." She glanced at him. "You speak as though systems confess." "They do," he said, "if you listen long enough." Another tremor passed through the walls, subtle but present. The lighting strips embedded along the staircase flickered from warm gold to cold white for half a second before stabilizing. Daniel calculated automatically. 12% reduction in redundancy meant the next surge would strain secondary capacitors by at least 15% beyond optimal tolerance. Not catastrophic. Not yet. But intentional. They reached the lower corridor, a wide chamber lined with transparent panels revealing layers of conduit and energy channels flowing like illuminated rivers. The core chamber door stood ahead, a circular structure of reinforced alloy nearly 8 inches thick. Symbols etched along its frame glowed faintly. The biometric scanner extended from the wall. At shoulder height, Aracel guided her platform forward. "If my clearance has been restricted further, we will know," she said. Her tone was calm, but Daniel sensed the tension beneath it. She placed her hand against the scanner. A soft chime responded. Blue light traveled over her palm, then across her irises. The system paused. For a moment that stretched longer than it should have, nothing happened. Then a neutral voice spoke. "Air access acknowledged. Limited override authority." The door remained closed. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Limited," he repeated. "That is new." She did not answer immediately. "It is," she said at last. The hum beneath their feet shifted again, slightly sharper. Daniel stepped toward the transparent paneling, studying the energy flow. "They reduced your clearance and the dome's support on the same night," he said quietly. "That is not coincidence." Aracel turned her platform slightly to face him fully. In the cold white light of the lower chamber, her blue skin reflected silver, almost luminous. "You are suggesting this is not about the storm," she said. "It is about control." Daniel looked at the sealed core door. "If the dome weakens in front of the court, it proves you cannot protect the empire. If your access is limited, it proves you cannot command it." He met her gaze. "Someone wants the narrative." A stronger vibration rolled through the corridor, enough to send a faint ripple across the energy channels behind the glass. The storm above was intensifying. Aracel drew a slow breath. "With limited override, I can authorize diagnostic access," she said. "But not full correction." Daniel gave a small, steady nod. "Then we do not ask for permission." He stepped closer to the paneling, eyes scanning for manual ports hidden behind decorative plating. "We find the physical bypass." For the first time since leaving the hall, Aracel allowed herself a slight smile. "You are very comfortable defying structure," she observed. Daniel ran his fingers along the edge of a conduit housing, feeling for the faint warmth that indicated rerouted current. "Only when structure forgets who it is meant to serve," he said quietly. Above them, the palace lights dimmed for one full second before surging back brighter than before. The storm was no longer the only force testing the empire. Daniel pressed his palm against the conduit housing and felt the warmth pulse through the alloy like a restrained heartbeat. "Here," he said quietly. The reroute is passing through this junction. The transparent panel revealed braided streams of blue energy flowing in disciplined lines, but one strand flickered with a faint, irregular shimmer. It was subtle, almost elegant, the kind of adjustment made by someone who understood the architecture intimately. Araceli guided her platform closer, lowering her eye level to match his. That conduit feeds the dome reinforcement and my stabilizers, she said. If someone is siphoning load, they are doing it upstream. Daniel nodded, eyes scanning for access seams. There should be a manual service port within 3 feet of the main line. They always hide them behind decorative plating to keep the design clean. He ran his fingers along the wall until he felt the faintest indentation, no wider than a credit card. He pressed gently, and a narrow panel slid open with a soft mechanical sigh. Inside, a physical interface port glowed amber, meant for emergency diagnostics. There, he murmured. Araceli watched him without interruption. If you connect without clearance, the system will log unauthorized intervention, she said. And he asked. And it will alert the high engineer. Daniel gave a faint smile that did not reach his eyes. Then we should make it worth the alert. He removed a compact diagnostic tool from his jacket pocket, the casing worn from years of use. It was not Palace issued. It was his. He connected it to the port, and a soft tone acknowledged the link. Lines of data scrolled across the small screen, reflecting against his face in pale light. Load distribution is being redirected through a ghost subroutine, he said after a moment. It is subtle. Every surge from the storm triggers a micro-adjustment that reduces your system priority by fractions of a percent. Over time, it compounds. Araceli's expression hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. Someone is measuring how far they can push before I notice, she said. Before anyone notices, Daniel corrected gently. He adjusted the diagnostic parameters, isolating the anomaly. The tool emitted a sharper tone. Found it, he whispered. A manual override embedded in the governor code. It is designed to look like automatic compensation. The palace lights dimmed again, this time for nearly 2 full seconds. The vibration beneath their feet deepened, a low resonance that traveled up Daniel's spine. Araceli's platform wavered slightly before correcting. She did not look away from him. Can you restore the balance? She asked. Daniel studied the data. Yes, he said slowly. But once I do, whoever set this will know someone traced it. Good, she replied without hesitation. Let them know. He hesitated for the briefest fraction of a second, then initiated the manual correction. The diagnostic tool pulsed brighter as it rewrote the load priority, reassigning full reinforcement to the dome and stabilizers. Above them, the vibration shifted. The hum smoothed into a steady tone, like a chord resolving into harmony. The lights stabilized, warm gold replacing the cold flicker. Daniel exhaled, unaware he had been holding his breath. Redundancy restored, he said quietly. Araceli closed her eyes for one brief moment, feeling the steadiness return beneath her. When she opened them, they were sharper than before. They expected me to endure, she said softly. They did not expect me to act. Daniel disconnected the tool and slid the panel back into place. Systems only stay honest, he replied, when someone refuses to look away. Above them, somewhere in the palace, an alert chimed. Not loud, not public, but deliberate. And this time, it was not the storm that had changed the balance. The alert did not echo through the corridors, but Daniel felt it like a shift in air pressure. Somewhere above, in a chamber lined with polished stone and inherited authority, someone had just been informed that the balance they adjusted had been restored. Araceli remained still for a long breath, listening not to the hum of the grid but to the silence that followed it. They know, she said quietly. Yes, Daniel replied. He slid the diagnostic tool back into his jacket, fingers steady. The conduit behind the transparent panel now flowed in clean, uninterrupted streams of blue light. No shimmer, no siphon. For the first time since descending beneath the hall, the vibration underfoot felt stable, like a foundation that remembered its purpose. Footsteps approached from the far end of the corridor, measured and deliberate. Not hurried, not alarmed. Daniel did not turn immediately. He did not need to. Authority carried its own frequency. Araceli rotated her platform slightly, posture upright, chin lifted. When the high engineer appeared at the end of the passage, flanked by 2 silent attendants, His expression was controlled neutrality. His uniform was immaculate, silver insignia aligned precisely over his heart. His gaze moved from the sealed corridor to Aracel, then to Daniel. "Your Highness," he said evenly, stopping 10 feet away. "We detected an unauthorized adjustment to the load balancing protocol." Arazel's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Yes," she said. "We corrected an imbalance." The engineer's eyes flicked briefly to Daniel's jacket, noting the faint outline of the tool beneath the fabric. "The system was compensating for storm irregularities," he replied. "Storms do not prioritize political optics," Daniel said before he could stop himself. The corridor grew still. The attendants did not move, but the air tightened slightly. The engineer regarded Daniel more closely now. "And you are?" "A mechanic," Daniel answered. "With ears." A pause. Arazel's lips curved almost imperceptibly. "He identified a manual override embedded in the governor code," she said. "One that reduced my stabilizer priority by 12%. The engineer's expression did not change, but something in his eyes recalculated. "A diagnostic safeguard," he said. "Temporary." "It did not inform me," Aracel replied, "which suggests it was not meant for my awareness." Silence stretched between them, measured in heartbeats and kilowatts. The dome above held steady, plasma rain sliding harmlessly across its surface now that full reinforcement had been restored. Daniel felt the stability like a steady pulse through the walls. The engineer inclined his head slightly. "The Emperor will wish to discuss this," he said at last. Aracel held his gaze without blinking. "I am certain he will." The engineer turned and walked back down the corridor, attendants following without a sound. When they disappeared from view, the chamber seemed larger somehow, as if tension had expanded the space. Daniel exhaled slowly. "That was not about the storm," he said quietly. "No," Aracel agreed. She looked at the conduit one more time, confirming its steady glow. "It was about whether I would notice, whether I would act." Daniel met her eyes. "You did both." She studied him in silence, the hum of the restored grid reflecting softly in her silver-blue gaze. "They will not underestimate you again," she said. He shook his head faintly. "It is not me they should reconsider." Above them, the palace lights shone warm and unwavering, as if nothing had shifted. But in the quiet beneath the marble and gold, something fundamental had changed. The system had been corrected, and someone had been watching who was not meant to see. They did not return to the grand hall immediately. Instead, Aracel guided her platform toward a narrower corridor branching off the core chamber, one lined with observation windows that looked out into the structural skeleton of the palace. Steel arches curved overhead like the ribs of a vast mechanical creature, each beam threaded with light. The storm still moved above them, but down here it felt distant, muted to a low vibration that resonated through the metal framework. Daniel walked beside her, hands loosely at his sides, senses still tuned to the grid. "He will call for you," he said quietly. "Your father." Aracel did not look at him. "He already has," she replied. At the end of the corridor, a door slid open without a sound. The chamber beyond was circular, modest compared to the grand hall, but every surface carried weight. Dark stone walls, a single panoramic window revealing the storm-swept skyline, and at the center, a long table carved from a single slab of black crystal. The Emperor stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. He did not turn when they entered. For several seconds, only the soft hum of Arazel's stabilizers filled the room. Daniel remained a step behind her, aware that his presence here was both uninvited and undeniable. "The dome holds," the Emperor said at last, voice calm, resonant. "It does," Aracel answered, "with full reinforcement." Silence followed. The Emperor turned slowly. His gaze moved first to his daughter, then to Daniel. It was not anger in his eyes. It was evaluation. "You corrected a governor adjustment," he said. "Yes," Aracel replied. "Without clearance. With necessity." The Emperor's eyes lingered on Daniel. "And you are the mechanic who heard what others did not." Daniel met his gaze evenly. "I heard something that did not belong." The Emperor studied him for a long moment, as though measuring weight without scales. "The adjustment was intentional," he said. "A simulation. A test of resilience." Arazel's voice remained steady. "A test of my obedience," she said. The Emperor did not deny it. "An empire survives by pressure," he replied. Leaders must endure instability. Daniel felt the tension in the air shift again, subtle but real. He did not step forward. He did not lower his gaze. Endure is not the same as lead, he said quietly. The Emperor's attention sharpened. Explain. Daniel chose his words carefully. If someone reduces your daughter's support systems without her knowledge, they are not testing resilience. They are measuring how much control they can remove before she reacts. That does not strengthen an empire. It weakens trust inside it. The room fell still. Outside the window, lightning flickered silently across the dome, illuminating the skyline in pale flashes. Araceli did not look at Daniel, but her shoulders seemed lighter, as if something long carried had shifted. The Emperor's expression did not soften, but it changed. Not defensive, reflective. You speak boldly for a contract worker, he said. I speak as someone who fixes systems, Daniel replied. And systems fail when the people inside them stop being honest. The Emperor turned his gaze back to his daughter. For a moment, father replaced ruler. You chose to act, he said to her. Yes, she answered. I did. A slow breath left him. Not defeat. Recognition. Then the simulation has served its purpose, he said quietly. He looked at Daniel once more. And you, he added, have complicated my evening. Daniel almost smiled. That was not the plan. The Emperor's lips curved faintly. No, he agreed. It rarely is. Outside, the storm began to lose its intensity, plasma strikes spacing farther apart. Inside the chamber, something far less visible had shifted. Not the balance of power, the balance of trust. And for the first time that night, Araceli did not feel like a variable being measured. She felt like a leader who had chosen. The storm thinned to a silver veil beyond the panoramic window, distant lightning flickering like fading applause. Inside the chamber, the air felt different, less charged, as if something heavier than plasma had finally discharged. The Emperor remained standing near the glass, but his posture no longer carried the rigid weight of command. It carried consideration. Araceli guided her platform a few inches forward, placing herself fully between her father and Daniel. It was not defiance. It was clarity. If the simulation has served its purpose, she said evenly, then its lesson should be acknowledged. The Emperor's gaze rested on her, steady and unreadable. And what lesson do you propose, my daughter? Araceli did not hesitate. That leadership is not proven by silent endurance. It is proven by choosing when to intervene. The words did not echo loudly, yet they settled into the stone walls with permanence. Daniel remained still, hands relaxed at his sides. He felt out of place in a room carved from black crystal and centuries of authority, yet he did not feel small. He felt present. The Emperor shifted his attention toward him again. You intervened without rank, he said. Without invitation. Daniel nodded once. The system needed correction, he replied. And she deserved to know. The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly. Deserved. Daniel met his gaze without raising his voice. If she is expected to lead the empire one day, she should not be the last to be informed when it is being adjusted. Silence followed, but it was not tense. It was contemplative. Outside, the final waves of plasma dissipated against the dome, leaving the skyline clear and sharp under distant stars. The Emperor walked slowly toward the central table, his footsteps measured. For many years, he said quietly, I believe pressure was the only teacher strong enough to prepare a ruler. He paused, glancing briefly at Araceli's stabilizers, then back to her face. Perhaps I have mistaken isolation for strength. Araceli held his gaze, not accusing, not pleading, simply present. Isolation teaches survival, she said softly, not trust. The word trust lingered in the air like a new variable introduced into an old equation. The Emperor drew a slow breath. Then tonight, he said at last, we adjust more than the grid. He turned to Daniel. Your contract with the palace was temporary. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle around him. Yes, sir. It is no longer temporary. The statement was calm, deliberate. You will remain as systems consultant to the Imperial Core. Direct access. Transparent protocols. Daniel blinked once, absorbing it. He had expected dismissal. At best, quiet gratitude. Not this. On one condition, the Emperor added. Daniel straightened slightly. Name it. The Emperor's gaze shifted briefly to Araceli, then back. You will continue to speak when you hear something that does not belong. Daniel allowed himself a faint smile. That I can do. Arizel's eyes reflected the starlight beyond the window, silver threads against blue. For the first time, the stabilizers beneath her hummed not as a reminder of limitation, but as a steady foundation. The storm had passed. The system had been corrected. But more importantly, a silence that had lasted for years had finally been broken. And in its place stood something far less fragile than pressure. It was partnership. The grand hall had quieted by the time they returned, though no one would have admitted that anything unusual had occurred. Crystal chandeliers glowed warm above polished marble, and the orchestra resumed its careful melody as if the empire itself had decided to breathe normally again. Daniel walked beside Arizel's platform, not ahead, not behind, simply present. The storm outside had dissolved into scattered light across a clear night sky, stars sharp and unchallenged beyond the dome. Nobles stepped aside instinctively as they passed, not because of him, but because of her. Yet their eyes lingered on the mechanic in worn boots and a jacket that still carried the faint scent of ozone. At the center of the hall, beneath the golden crest, Arizel paused. The hover stabilizers lowered her gently until she was eye level with Daniel, without the barrier of distance. For a moment, the noise of the court softened, as though the room itself understood this was not spectacle, but something quieter. You changed more than a load balance tonight, she said softly. Daniel shook his head once. You did, he replied. I just pointed at the noise. She studied him with that same sharp curiosity from earlier, but now there was something steadier beneath it. Not testing, not guarded. Most people in this hall hear power, she said. You hear intention. He considered that, glancing up at the dome where stars now shone undistorted. Power is loud, he answered. Intention is subtle. It hums under everything. A faint smile touched her lips. Around them, conversation resumed in cautious waves, but the tone had shifted. Less performance, more awareness. The emperor watched from the balcony above, not intervening, not signaling. Simply observing as his daughter occupied the space at the center of the empire without apology. Daniel felt the weight of his new role settle onto his shoulders. It was heavier than a toolkit, lighter than regret. You could have walked away, Arizel said quietly. After the correction, after the alert. I could have, he admitted. But systems only stay honest if someone stays to listen. Her gaze held his, silver reflecting starlight. Then stay, she said. Not as a command. As an invitation. The stabilizers beneath her hummed at a steady frequency, no longer flickering, no longer compensating for hidden interference. Just steady. Daniel looked around the hall one last time, at silk and crystal. And centuries of tradition. He did not belong here by birth or by title. He belonged because he chose to stand where imbalance existed. He gave a small nod. All right, he said. No grand vow. No dramatic gesture. Just a decision. Above them, the dome shimmered faintly as residual energy dissipated into the night. The empire stood intact, not because it had been tested, but because someone had refused to let the test remain hidden. And as the music swelled gently beneath the returning stars, Arizel felt something she had not felt in years. Not protection, not pressure, partnership. In a palace built on power, the quietest sound that night was trust finding its place.